This business is not rocket science. We spend about $750,000 a year on our fleet, on repair and maintenance, mechanics, so 1% of budget. Big picture, this is a 50% gross margin business, and these are 20% EBITDA margin businesses when properly run.
We're about 8 months into using Avoca, and Avoca's been an awesome partner for us in our call center. So what Avoca does for us is they do two different things. One, they have their Coach product, and Coach has been helping us do what it says. Coach our CSRs every single day. It listens to every call and uses AI technology to basically pick apart that call and tell us where we can improve. And for the last 8 months, we've been consistently improving our scores, which has been awesome. The other product they have is just conventional booking. And it's an AI tool that books over the phone. A customer calls in and it either handles overflow, as in our phones are full, or it does nights and weekends for us. And a customer will call in and actually deal with an AI agent all the way through booking. And the savings inside call center has allowed us to ramp up our marketing to continue to grow even more. Thank you, Avoca, and thank you, Tyson, for your partnership.
Welcome back to Owned and Operated. Today, Jack Carr, I'm hosting this thing, and we have the one, the only Matt Saskins with East Coast Towing. Matt, what's going on, man?
How is it going? I'm currently in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was down here for a towing conference. My family's flying down this afternoon, then we get on a cruise tomorrow. So all good.
You know, how exciting was the towing conference for you?
So no, I've got to say, actually, there were a bunch, right? So there are 3 or 4 around the country that are your sort of big trade shows, right? Like the big one is in Baltimore every year. It takes over the entire Baltimore Convention Center. Like, super cool to go, shiny objects, like all the truck manufacturers there, lots of stuff to look at. Like, that is super cool. But from a practical standpoint, you don't learn a ton there because, like, I think as I've said elsewhere, like, this is a fairly unprofessional industry. So you don't have a lot of people that are actually paying attention to their business. The thing I just went to, which is the Towing and Recovery Summit, was highly recommended by a bunch of folk that I trust a lot. Small, like probably 80 people. But, you know, those might be the only 80 companies in the country where the owners are actually paying attention to, like, how to actively make their business better. Like, some of the largest companies in the country are represented. So it was actually super, super valuable. So yeah, like a total opposite from what the other towing conferences are. Yeah.
No, I enjoy it because we joke. My wife specifically jokes at me when I'm saying, hey, I'm going to the ACAA or like one of these conferences, and I get all excited and get like jittery about it. And she's like, you're such a nerd. And I posted on Twitter the other day. She calls all of us like these groups of ex-Twitter people, like business buying nerds. Like, you guys are all nerds. Friends. Yeah, weird internet friends is very accurate. But like, this is what we love doing, is talking about business and doing that. And the cool part, like, I actually looked at a lot of towing businesses in my personal search of like trying to buy a business, so much so that I was comfortable talking about it like on one of the first podcasts. I think John and I at like episode 102 or something, where I just came on and we're business breakdowns. Like, towing was one of the first ones we did.
Cool.
So I was like, I know this industry. It was more so from like the standpoint of they did like local residential towing for not like recovery, like, hey, police, like someone's parked illegally or HOA. So kind of fun. I'm really excited to dig in. So can we start with your history? Like, what were you before you bought the towing business, and then why towing, and then like first 6 months of towing?
Yeah, absolutely. So background is in the technology space, in kind of everything from technical sales and sales leadership. I've had general management and executive roles, been at global enterprises and service providers, worked at, VC-backed startups and some PE software turnarounds. So done kind of a lot of things in the tech space. Was fortunate enough to be able to spend some time doing M&A in my corporate life, albeit at a very different scale. Like, we're talking, $50 million to $500 million EV deals. But still, like, had that exposure. And then, spent a bunch of time, again, with PE-backed companies, which was sort of a super helpful experience. So that has been my career. We get to COVID, and like my wife and I over the years had built up a fairly reasonable real estate portfolio. Took the opportunity to sell everything over COVID because essentially got an unsolicited offer on one building we owned. Went, oh wow, that's more than I would buy this for. So okay, cool, let's go. Actively marketed the rest, sold the whole portfolio. And then we were at this place of, okay, cool, what's next? Like where we put some of that money. Had talked through the idea of buying an operating business, and then started kind of looking, and that would be mid 22, like late spring, early summer. The search was effectively.
Let me ask you real quick.
Yeah.
So were you industry agnostic? Like, hey, I don't care what it is as long as it's like a cash flowing, boring industry, but I want to stay in Raleigh specifically. Was that your MO?
Not quite. So needed to stay in Raleigh. Like we were going to pick up and move. Needed to be of large enough, right? We were broadly looking for something that was kind of in the $1 million EBITDA or larger range. Because it's a combination of being big enough to be meaningful, but also something I could take down myself. Like I don't have investors; it's just us.
Yeah.
And then the third was, I wouldn't call it industry agnostic so much as there are certain industries that I did not want to invest in. So like, right, I think everybody's right, like hospitality and retail and all that is just off the table because I don't have what it takes to do that. Home services in our market, I think it was not going to be the play, simply because like if you think about the value creation playbook in home services, at least as I understand it, in our market, companies have been doing that for the past decade. So I think there's really like in the Raleigh area, there wasn't any space to breathe there, and from my vantage point.
It's definitely the Raleigh region, greater Raleigh is definitely a market where it's the same. It's actually the issue that I ran into when I bought my business. It's you are a small fish, even at $1 million in EBITDA, you're a small fish in a really big pond with a lot of big players and private equity and really smart individuals who've been running playbooks for 5-10 years.
Right.
Very
if I can think of where we've been in the area now 13, 14 years, but when we first moved down, like right there, the electrician showed up like with an iPad doing all the thing, like doing all the stuff, right? So industries that didn't want to invest in, but was fairly open beyond that. Like looked at some small manufacturers, looked at some construction businesses, and then as it happened, there were 2 towing businesses on the market in Raleigh at the same time. Looked at both of them. I'll share more about them because they kind of explain the 2 sides of the towing industry. But kind of one of them fit from a sort of size and all that perspective. Like the owners, from my perspective, part of it had been de-risked in that it had already gone through an inadvertent ownership change 7 or 8 years prior when the founder passed away unexpectedly and his wife took over the business. So it had been through that transfer once, and also the current owner, the founder's wife, and her father-in-law, who she brought in to help run it, neither of them drove a truck, right? They weren't tow truck drivers by background. All those things combined, I really like that business. And then, spent a bunch of months going fairly deep on the industry. Went up to the big tow show in Baltimore about a month before close as the final sanity check of like, okay, does this, is everything I think about this industry actually accurate? And, kind of the water held. So here we are. I mean, the broad thesis, such as it is like cars and trucks aren't going to stop breaking down. Cars and trucks aren't going to stop getting in accidents. So let's go.
Very good thesis. And there's going to be more and more cars and trucks in America. I mean, we don't look like we're going the other way in terms of trend. Very interesting. And so you looked at these 2 businesses. You bought one of them or you bought both?
Bought one.
Bought one.
Another searcher bought the other. I know him. We talk regularly because of the differences between these 2 businesses. We're actually not competitors.
Yeah. So talk about the 2 different routes that towing can go and why they don't cross over.
Right. So broadly, the way we describe it in the industry is there's consensual towing and there is non-consensual towing. Right, non-consensual towing is kind of what everyone immediately goes to. It is private property impound or repo of vehicles, right? So that's the snatching cars at parking lots, illegal parking, that kind of thing. And then consensual towing is the opposite, right? Is customers, people, your individual consumers, businesses, etc., calling us to come and do a thing, move a broken down vehicle, relocate equipment from A to B, deal with accident recovery, etc. And those 2 tend to not overlap for a bunch of reasons. One is that the business models are fundamentally different. Like one is a one, your customer is the person whose vehicle you're towing. The other, your customer is fundamentally like property managers and things like that. The second is that the profile of the drivers is very different. Like, to be blunt, the guys that want to run PPI, like they want permission to go steal cars.
Yeah.
And those drivers, like, they don't want to work for us, and vice versa. Our guys don't want to go work at a PPI or repo shop. And there's all sorts of fallout from that, right? The insurance is very, very different. Like, the other business in town, like I said, I know Carr really well. We get together all the time. The only similarity between our businesses is we own tow trucks.
What's the difference in, because I would imagine that, don't get me wrong, right? The non-consensual towing, definitely a part of it is emergency service. It is, I wouldn't say it's 24/7, but there is an after hours aspect. But I imagine that consensual towing has to be a 24/7 kind of gig. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, so they're both 24/7. And in fact, the PPI businesses run like a true, you might be running 8, 10, 12 trucks on a 3-shift 24/7 basis, because you're really getting busiest second and third shift, right? You think like people are at bars and restaurants and parking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas like we run 24/7. We've got folks in trucks 24/7 plus an on-call schedule over the top of it, but at a much lower volume, right? So during the day, on a given day, I may have 20 drivers in trucks, 25 drivers in trucks. Overnight, I've got, 2 ready to go, and then more that we can call in if something goes crazy, just because the sort of ebbs and flows throughout the day.
Yeah, I imagine. That's awesome. So you bought this business, you get inundated into the consensual. I love that, by the way. It's an easy way to describe it. Like, that actually makes a lot of sense. The consensual towing market, and you close on this business, and now you're running it. What does that first couple months look like?
So the one thing I'd say is this business is not rocket science. Like, this is not a particularly complicated business, right? Like, our largest costs are all things that are fairly straightforward to understand.
I'm stopping you, Matt, on that one. I think it is. I think this business is not for you, but there's a reason that it's stayed fragmented for so long. Like, it is
Which we can get into, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely want to.
There are challenges there, but they are not challenges in understanding how to operate the business. They are challenges in like scale. As we faced, in how you grow it and how things maneuver, right? So like, not to distract from what the guys do. Like, our operators are really well paid, highly skilled, tons of experience, especially the guys doing heavy towing. They have CDLs, they have a ton of mechanical experience.
I want to get into that too, because I've seen some awesome pictures that you have on Twitter. I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks like a technical nightmare to try and get that truck.
For sure. The running of the business, fairly straightforward. Like, the big moving pieces, right? We have a lot of assets, right? There's a lot of trucks moving around, and like, we spend a ton of money on insurance, fuel, people, and maintenance of the trucks. Beyond that, it's all fairly straightforward stuff. And even there, what you get is at a certain point, at the size of our business, right? So it was 38 people at the time of acquisition, something like that, 35. There was no management layers, because the prior ownership it was pure top-down command and control, and that's it. But, we've since promoted some folks into supervisor roles. But there were enough people there that, I told everyone day one, and I'll still tell new folks this, like, I'm not driving a tow truck, right? I've driven our trucks. I know how to operate them. But the day that I have to go and sort of use a tow truck in anger, there's like 10 things, 12 things that have all had to go wrong along the way.
Yeah,
and it's going to be a super, super bad day for everybody involved. Right? There are better things for me to be doing with my time to make sure that our drivers and the operators and everybody else have the work for them to do, right? So my focus is growing the business in a scalable way, making sure everybody has an opportunity to earn money, making sure that we can, that we can continue to add to the benefits package we offer to the team every year. And, I'm going to focus on that piece of the puzzle. I happen to I am mechanically handy. I've built a bunch of cars. I know how to work on vehicles. So I think I was able to sort of jump in there and inherently understand what's going on from a truck standpoint. But again, I've got mechanics. There are people to do all of those things. There would not be at a much smaller business, right? I know people.
I was going to say, and that makes sense. That's a great point, though, because we talk about that, especially in like SMB Twitter, and that a lot is like the size of the business you buy is extremely important to your skill set. Because if you bought a 12-person trucking company, like, you would have to jump in a truck inevitably.
Right.
But
or you're much more beholden to everybody,
Yeah, exactly.
or you have more cost involved in certain things for sure.
Interesting. Okay. So you buy this large trucking business, you're not driving trucks, but you're growing it. And so what does scale, I'm actually fascinated because as I'm trying to like draw linear congruencies between our businesses, I'm even thinking like from a scale perspective, marketing, like how do you do marketing? Because it's not actual lead gen in the way that we look at lead gen. Like you wouldn't post on Facebook unless it's branding plays. And then like even like lead gen from Google, which has to be your number one, I would imagine, because somebody's on the side of the road and they Google real quick, towing company near me. Yeah. So it becomes like all you're focused on is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but mostly of what you're focused on is going to be Google SEO, Google optimization, and then like some branding on the back end to try and keep people
so I think
top
it's
of
important
mind.
to think about who our customers are, and kind of fundamentally we think about it as being three things, right? We've got individual consumers who are customers. So that would be like someone broke down on the side of the road and they don't have AAA or don't have Motor Club or whatever, and they're just Googling, tow truck near me. The second is commercial customers, right? B2B type accounts. And those range from a lot of searcher type businesses, right? A lot of small, mid-sized home services businesses, all the way up through the large national fleets who had, 20,000 trucks around the country, and they call us if they break down in our market. And then the third would be municipalities, right? Police departments, highway patrol, accident recovery type stuff. So if you look at those three, like police departments, municipal stuff is fundamentally a location-based game, right? And in order to be on more government contracts, we need to be in those physical areas. So if I wanted to expand into a different county and join their rotations, their police and highway patrol, I'd have to physically be in that county, right? I have to go and open up a storage yard, add some trucks in that county and physically expand. And that's why, right, for a relatively small business, right, we've got 6 physical locations because they all have to be sort of proximate to certain towns. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second, the commercial side of things is one where, frankly, we've still not cracked the code on organic growth there yet. Like we've had a sales rep out in the market for about 12 months now. In fairness, he's having fairly mediocre results, so we're probably going to make some changes there. And a recent acquisition we made, I think, will change the direction we approach organic growth for commercial customers.
And that looks like just typical B2B, like, hey, go out, pound pavement, meet people. Okay.
Yep. And it's a market, I don't imagine it's like others, right, where the amount that a fleet spends on towing is small, right? Like 1% of the fleet budget. Right. Hopefully. Right. So it's hard to get people to switch, because if they're a big fleet, right? Like to put it in perspective, we, after some acquisitions, we're 50 trucks ish. We spend about $750,000 a year on our fleet, on repair and maintenance, mechanics, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And if we were to, like, if one of my things breaks down, we tow it ourselves. But if I put a dollar amount on that, we'd spend, $7,500 a year, maybe, on towing. So 1% of budget. Hard to get someone to change where they're spending 1% of budget unless the other company just egregiously screws up.
Yeah, it can't be a money play, because, right, if you come in at, hey, we can do 5% better than, it's like 5% of 1%. It's like,
right. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
And then on the cash call side of things, individual customers, and to be clear, that is not just like you with a broken down car. That also is a lot of like owner operators that have one tractor trailer and they happen to break down in market. So that is a combination of SEO, local, right, Google My Business stuff. We've experimented with paid, and paid works really well for heavy towing because the ticket size is larger and it's easier to convert. Paid for us works extraordinarily poorly for light duty, that is like passenger vehicle towing, because we just have too much competition, right? There's too many like guys in a truck who will charge $70 for something we'd charge $150 for. So we basically we get those coming in via mostly organic, because paid didn't work for us. Like basically we had, right, so big picture, this is a 50% gross margin business, and we had kind of a 2x ROAS on light duty paid. So we were effectively not making money.
Yeah.
Whereas,
you need it closer to 6 to make it even work on
heavy
paid.
Towing, we run between 7 and 9x ROAS. And the problem there is we run at a volume before we run at a budget, right? I would throw as much money as I could at 9x ROAS, but we run at a budget, or we run at a volume at $700 in spend a month, something like that. It's not much.
Mm-hmm. And so walk me through percentage, right? You kind of put it into three big buckets. Walk me through percentage. Like and I'm going to say what I imagine first. I would imagine that you're probably 60% working on that residential or direct to consumer type, then maybe 20% on commercial contracts and another, what is that, 60, 70, 80, another 20% on the municipality, maybe higher municipality or lower residential.
Yeah. So we're indexed the other way. We're about, and it's also important to think about it in terms of volume versus revenue, because light duty, right, a passenger vehicle tow, our average across the board is like $180, give or take.
Oh yeah.
Whereas heavy duty tow, our average is like $612, something like that. So much lower volume, much higher proportion of revenue. So when I look at it from a revenue standpoint, we're 35%, give or take. Passenger vehicle, cash call, that's sort of individual consumer. We are 45-50% commercial accounts. And then the remaining, what is that? The remaining 20-ish% or so are police rotations, accident recoveries, et cetera. And again, those numbers waver depending on whether you're looking at volume or revenue. But yeah, like we index towards the heavy side of things. That's a big surprise to me. I thought you were indexing more towards the residential side, but I mean, it makes sense, right? Because the commercial customers generally have bigger vehicles. It's going to be more towards heavy towing, which has the bigger average tickets. Okay. And I bet it's more niche, right? In the sense that there's fewer competitors. Yeah. Like we're in a dense market. There's still a lot of competition, but substantially less on the heavy towing than there is on light duty. Because again, light duty, like, you could go tomorrow, buy a used autoloader, which is the thing, if you close your eyes and picture a tow truck, what you're going to picture. You go buy a used autoloader for 40 or 50 grand and like go to work.
No, I picture the big boys that are pulling tractor trailers. That's what I want.
I love 40 or 50 grand, but you could still get one if you have your CDL and go to work.
Yeah, no, those are really cool. I love seeing those go. Sweet. And so okay, so you buy this first one, and then you get the wild hair, like, hey, I'm going to grow this thing. Yeah. Which every small owner does and imagines. Yeah, and so the way that one of the ways that you've identified and you kind of mentioned already is acquisitions. So what did you optimize for there? What did that look like?
Spent the first 6 to 12 months just kind of like letting dust settle, getting a sense of what's going on. Made a handful of changes, nothing mission critical, nothing hugely impactful to the employees, aside from, we put a ton of time and energy into safety, process and procedure, things like that. And those were just non-negotiable changes, right? Like people that weren't on board with that can have a nice day working somewhere else. Simultaneous to that, right, started experimenting with marketing spend and doing a lot of tracking and attribution to where phone calls are coming from. Because fundamentally, we only do things via phone call. Like customers don't text us. There's no chatting. There's no email. They call us. So, right, we use CallRail, spend a ton of time and energy on identifying all the different sources of phone calls and what's valuable and what's not. So that helped get a sense of things. Started experimenting with paid, spent, 3-4 months on, can we make paid work? Discovered, okay, yes for heavy duty, no for light duty. Through the side of that also then, brought on an outside sales rep and kind of watched those motions. And, that was an investment I was prepared to make. From there, I sort of, there was another business out there in an adjacent industry, sort of oversized transport. So think, right, those things you could see going down the road with like, oversized load, whatever, construction equipment, stuff like that, that I looked at originally. And it was too small as a standalone. Like it would not have made sense. It was only 10 people, 500,000 in SDE. Owner was driving a truck. New owner would have had to be driving a truck. So like looked at it, liked it, but threw it into the pile. And like a year in, after buying East Coast Towing, went and looked and saw that was still on the market. So reached out to the broker, reached out to the seller, and just like started talking to them because it actually, for a bunch of reasons, makes a ton of sense as an adjacency to us.
And when you say adjacency, you mean like a secondary vertical? So like actually like transport?
Yeah, like we view it, it's fully in it. Short, fast forward, we closed on that deal. But like we view it as a different service line. So like started looking at that.
Wild.
And we were at the probably 18-month mark when, I sat down and like was talking to my GM and talking to some other folks. And I think we all realized like, okay, things are running well. Like the supervisors, the folks that we promoted into roles, the way I sort of describe it is at the 3-month mark when we put someone into a driver manager role, And if you presented him with a challenge, just like something to deal with, it would get solved 100% of the time. But 90% of the time, it would get solved in the what is the most expedient thing that eliminates this pain from in front of me. Whereas 10% of the time, it's like, what's the right way to solve this for the future, knowing that however I handle this, I have to handle it the same way for 20 other drivers. And by about month 18, kind of what I realized is, okay, cool. When we present that person with a challenge now, 80% of the time it's getting solved in the way that is forward thinking, that is planning for like, okay, how does this set a precedent and how do we do this in the right way? And that was a pretty good indicator that like, okay, cool. The team has started to mature. Some of the lessons are settling in, and we probably have the bandwidth and availability to really contemplate some add-ons.
One of the benefits of working with Wilson is that we are basically a same day, next day company. So what that means is if I sell a job today, I'm going to aim to get it in today, tomorrow, or the next day. Like we aim for a really fast turnaround. And because of that, we have pretty high expectations of our suppliers. Getting parts in time has been a real challenge, and supplyhouse.com has been a really awesome partner for us because of that. They've got like 250,000 SKUs. They've got it across plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. So they cover all our different lines, and they can get stuff to you fast, and they have a ton of it. Plus on top of that, they have best-in-class pricing, and their new TradeMaster program gives you free shipping, free returns, and a bunch of discounts over retail on top of it. And the TradeMaster program is free to join. So check out supplyhouse.com and make sure to check out their TradeMaster program.
That's an interesting way. That's a really interesting perspective. I think really mature in terms of business ownership is like you focus on like, hey, okay, now we can grow because the maturity of our managers are getting to a point where they can handle more.
Because the thing's not going to fall down, right? Like before I go sign on the dotted line for a couple of $1 million in additional debt,
in
like
PG,
I'd like to have a level of comfort that the team is prepared for it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a normal, like, honestly, I don't think that's a normal thing that people like talking with a lot of business owners. They're just like, like I think we maxed out the market. So we're just going to go build it, go expand in another market. And like they still have all, including myself, I did go down this road at one point. I was looking at a business 2.5 hours away and ended up not doing it because it wasn't a smart move. But like point being is like, I still like, this isn't ready, but I'm still like over here looking for expansion opportunities. And so even like moving into plumbing, I don't think we were ready from a HVAC point of view. Like our HVAC wasn't like running super smooth. And we're like, okay, let's start up plumbing. It was like, we still have issues here, but this is a great growth opportunity. Let's just figure it out.
It those weaknesses.
It definitely does.
The cracks start to hurt after a while.
They definitely do. So, that's a really awesome way to look at it is like, hey,
I think it's helpful. Like that's where having a long horizon and no particular mandate for growth, I think is helpful, right? Like I don't know because I don't have that pressure out there, but like I don't have investors. I don't have anybody to answer to but my family and our team and just making sure we're doing the right thing for everybody. So I'm in no rush to do things, and I'd much rather do it in a scalable manner than see things blow up and cause pain. Because I don't want the headaches and pain, right? I have enough stuff I have to deal with.
Are you sure?
I don't need more. So we felt we were ready, started pursuing that one. It took a long ass time to close for a variety of reasons. That's a whole different discussion. But so I say got that done. We closed that deal in October of 24, October last year. And in rapid fire succession, right around that time in like September, had another very small deal pop up in the market, fully brokered, like tiny, like 200,000 in SCE. Another adjacent service line, it's a mobile fleet service business. So again, like a lot of our customers in that service line are searcher businesses, right? 10 to 50 vehicle home services businesses, delivery, that kind of thing. But that business, like we show up on site, it operates 24/7. We do all the pre-scheduled maintenance of vehicles. So if you're an HVAC fleet of 20 transits, like we can show up at 7 p.m. or 10 p.m. on a Tuesday and do all your oil changes, brakes, chip tire changes. We work with all the fleet management companies, so we can do all the billing for that. So that one popped up. Price was extraordinarily reasonable. So cool. we moved super quick on that as well. And closed on that in early December. And now here we are, kind of letting the dust settle and figuring out what to do now.
That's awesome. We utilize one. I know almost everyone that I know who owns a home service business utilizes one because it's just so inefficient to have to take individual vehicles out into like a Jiffy Lube. Like we're having a meeting downstairs, like a sales meeting, and we have the guys outside right now doing like 3 oil changes. So
I know that's exactly
because everyone's cars here.
That's why I love it. And when I think about how we sell, right? That is both an easy pitch because the market or the potential targets there's so many of them that the sales process really becomes, right? If someone is locked into the fact that, no, we just send our text out to Jiffy Lube, then like, okay, cool, no problem. We'll come back in a month and talk to you. But if you hit someone right when they have that pain point, they're like, oh, shit, this makes a ton of sense. We can go from a first cold meeting to a closed deal first service in 2 weeks.
And is there a synergy? I mean, I would imagine there's a synergy in this business where if you're doing like the fleet maintenance for a 50-person fleet, and you let them know, hey, by the way, if something does break down, we also have this towing company, and we'll give you a 10% deal. Like
there you go,
100%.
Consolidate billing. We give you the little cards and little stickers you can put inside your trucks to remind your techs if they get in an accident, call this number. You don't have to wait for whoever the police are going to call. So we're early days in that cross sell, but we are starting to see that have positive impact, and we think we can really step on the right. Like, to your point, it's easier if you're spending 30 or 40% of your fleet budget with me a year. Hell of a lot easier to get you to spend that 1% on towing with me as well, just because it's easier.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about this the other day. It was like junk removal or something, and the point was like in home services, the goal is always to stay top of mind, and so we do maintenances and memberships, and we have branding plays, and like there's this really top of mind thing. But with these singular services, I was with John because it was with roofing. Okay, it's like there's no top of mind for roofing because. Correct, you get one roof every 20 years, and like you don't want to think about your roof for the next 20 years. And so you go onto Google, you find the first person, and that's who you go with.
You get the best quotes,
reviews. Right? And I would imagine something similar with towing is like we've towed 2 vehicles. I don't even remember the name of the tow company we used, but I know the name of the maintenance, the fleet maintenance company that we use. So it's like if those could be the same, easy transition, even for me as the business owner, I would love that.
Yeah, because if you're a well-maintained fleet of 50 vans, let's say, you might only need a tow 2, 3, 4 times a year, if that, right? So it is such an infrequent occurrence but yeah, if I'm in your face or my trucks are in your face twice a month, doing oil changes, changing tires, all that, yes, absolutely.
100%. Sweet. So you own these 3 verticals. You've expanded to 6 locations. Is that including those other 2 companies?
Yeah. So those both added some facilities for us.
Does that also drive, like, can you utilize your fleet maintenance facility as a tow yard to grab an extra municipality as well?
Yeah, so the fleet maintenance one is not in a different enough market, so we're not leveraging it there. But the heavy haul yard, the one we use for the oversized transport business, is about an hour west of us in a more rural market. We actually are just this week, I think, relocated 3 tow trucks out there and are going to start sort of expanding the towing footprint based out of there as well. So yeah, we're early days there, but I'd expect we have that county sort of fully running from a towing standpoint in the next 60 to 90 days.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, that one I'm excited about because like it's a rural market right there. So we have 1 or 2 competitors versus like 20.
And so speaking of that, like expansion and growth and next steps, like what do the next steps look like for you?
Yeah, so I would like to say that the plan is let the dust settle and kind of see how this year shakes out. And I think we can stick to that. Like, unless something super cool comes along. And I look at deals all the time. I have a couple of local owners who've reached out to me because they're interested in selling. And there's one deal locally that I really like, but the broker and seller are out to lunch in terms of value. So if something super cool comes along, we'd figure out a way to do it. But otherwise, the goal is like, all right, let's let the dust settle. Let's get through this year and see where we land. I would like to, at some point, probably recap the debt, only because we'd probably save 1% or 2. But more importantly, I've got 3 different SBA loans and 2 SBA lines of credit. It would just be really nice to like group that all together into one wire transfer I have to send a month.
Yeah, and because I wasn't going to touch on it just because I imagine like this, and you could do an entire hour-long episode on just like the way you have to think about financing and debt and assets, just because you have so many assets, and like one vehicle expansion, especially in the heavy, like you're saying, is 100, 200, maybe more thousand, more than 200,000, and so like the debt on the business it has to be crazy, especially if. Right, your average ticket is $600. Like, I'm just doing math in my head, and some of those numbers.
No, there's a lot of moving pieces. But the flip side of that is these assets, especially on the heavy side, last a long time. And when you think about heavy towing, the average ticket is, $612, something like that. But like you were mentioning, if you follow me on Twitter, I post a bunch of stuff of
very cool stuff.
Heavy recoveries we do. Those are $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 build jobs.
Okay.
No, they don't happen all that frequently in our market, again, because of density and kind of where we are from a truck thoroughfare standpoint. And similar, a heavy haul business, the oversized transport, when you see me post a picture of a bunch of our trucks moving a crawler crane for a customer, that is a job that takes 6 or 7 trucks for 3 days. We had a crew this week out, moving a crawler crane from Charlotte down to Augusta, and then immediately going to Charleston to move something back up somewhere into North Carolina. So they moved 2 cranes last week. They'll jump immediately to 2 more cranes next week. So those are big ticket, right? Those we're talking $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to move a crawler crane.
Still though, from a standpoint of just the financing is just so different from home services because we have nothing, we had a truck, we had maybe a couple more $1,000s in monthly debt on a Maverick, $2,000 a month. Right. And then we have to go through training and some hiring and there is cost, but nothing compared to a huge
we're having
new
$500,000
asset.
truck at a clip.
Yeah. So it's just a different world. We hire, fire, upgrade, layoff, anything like that is a much quicker movement versus if you grow, it's huge.
People are straightforward to do. All the rest of it, the dynamics are fine. For us, the biggest moving object there is really just the trucks are extraordinarily expensive, right?
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And also it makes sense on the growth trajectory. Hey, I'm going to let it settle just because, you're technically running 3 different businesses. Even if some of them have similarities and synergies, it still is 3 separate businesses that you have to market and manage in different ways.
Yeah, there's enough difference between them. We're now getting through sharing resources. So our, as an example, our fleet service techs are starting to spend some time in the towing shop just to learn how to work on bigger trucks because fleet service is fundamentally smaller, right? It's smaller scale vehicles, box trucks, transit vans, things like that. So they're getting training on the big trucks on our fleet. A bunch of a bunch of the tow operators have CDLs, so they can drive the heavy haul trucks and they have that background. So we can sort of cross pollinate there as we need to fill in or have additional work.
Of course.
But they are still fundamentally kind of similar customer base, but different businesses.
Yeah, the way I try to look at it at the end of the day, because it's the same thing. We're still in the same homes. You could run a pest control, roofing, an HVAC, plumbing. But at the end of the day, if I want to drive pest control leads for my plumbing company, or HVAC leads for my plumbing company, I might have to do right now. At the end of the day, it's still completely separate marketing budget. It's its own beast of offers and it's just different, even though a lot of the similarities and technically and they even have from a mechanical and licensing standpoint, mechanical can do gas pipe, plumbing can do gas pipe. So it's so much similarity, but so different at the same time. So interesting. I want to do a segment here called Is This Business a Piece of Shit? So no, I'm just kidding. Sorry to the broker who we're going to show this business. So everybody jump on YouTube. I'm going to pull up a towing business in my market.
Business, but it won't
We have not pre-rehearsed this. So let's take a look, Matt.
Right.
I want to see if I should buy this towing business in my market.
Cool. Let's do it.
So boom, I'm going to open it up. Tennessee, Hamilton County. We are looking at
I've not seen this one yet.
Well, maybe you need to start diversifying statewide.
Where's Hamilton County, just so I know?
So it's south. Well, this actually says that it operates in Nashville, Chattanooga, and Atlanta. So it's looking like the I-65 all the way down.
Got it. Okay.
Pretty much from Nashville to Atlanta looks like its ownership base. 24 tow trucks, 14 vendor codes across 60 zip codes, and 30 in Nashville and 100 in Atlanta. I don't know what that means either.
Okay.
I was hoping you did.
No, I don't know what the vendor code is.
So 25 employees, has a 4,000 square foot building, 2-acre lot. Okay. It doesn't say what kind of towing it does.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you could guesstimate based on looking
all right,
at it.
So let's see. They're asking 2.4 on 400,000 in cash flow, I'm doing this super high speed, 2.8 million in revenue. I don't care about the real estate if it's not included. And they're calling it 1.8 million in trucks. So the things that come to mind immediately are, so number one, the number of people kind of jives with the revenue. In fact, it's actually a little on the heavy side. I would expect to see maybe a few fewer than 20. I think it said 24 employees, right?
25. Yeah.
25. Okay. Yeah. I'd expect to actually see fewer than that for kind of 2.5, 2.8 in revenue. And that's actually that's a positive thing in that it might mean that unlike most towing companies this size, these guys actually kind of have some structure in place, right? Dispatch might be some dedicated dispatchers, not just the owner taking the phone calls on his cell phone in his truck and someone at the front office, probably his partner, taking phone calls as well. So,
yeah,
and that would also
exactly.
lead to the second point. This is producing quite a fair bit less cash flow. And right, it's always hard to say because who knows what they're actually calling cash flow. But like,
yeah, is that SDE? Is that EBITDA?
Right.
You know,
so
what are they doing there?
For consensual towing businesses, which I would imagine these guys are, because otherwise they'd probably say it. These are 20% EBITDA margin businesses when properly run, right? So at 2.8 million in revenue, I expect this to be in the $550,000 range, something like that. So, you know, that could just be them not properly doing ad backs, or it could be they're kind of overstaffed, which is fine. It's not a terrible place to build.
Which, I mean, based on what you said to start, it kind of sounds like 24 tow trucks, but 25 employees means maybe they're not including the owner. There's 2 employees in the office, 24 tow trucks on the road, but it's running heavy. So
and that
either
has one more interesting point, which is these businesses are generally all over trucked, right? Everyone has far too many assets. And the primary reason for that is, the owners drive the trucks. The owners like buying shiny new trucks. A lot of the owners are under the impression that the only way you can attract and retain driver talent is by having shiny new trucks. And what you end up with then is a company with a disproportionately high chunk of assets. And that then leads us to this thing that's producing, let's be generous and say it's actually doing what it should be, and it's producing $550,000 in EBITDA. It's still not worth, what is that? That's 4.2x off the top of my head, something like that. Like,
yeah, it's almost 5x if it was 2.5, right? 5 times 5 is 25. Like, yeah, it's almost 5x.
Businesses don't sell for that, just to be very clear. So like, interestingly enough, there's one major consolidator in the towing industry right now, called Guardian Fleet Services. They're based out of Florida. They're about 200 million in revenue today. Their CEO presented at the conference I was just at, and he made abundantly clear their buy box. They are right now buying companies at between 3.5 and 4.5x, and they are only doing deals larger than 10 million EV. So if the single consolidator, right, the guy that's got $100 million on his balance sheet, is saying he's only paying 4.5x for $10 million EV deals, so 2 million plus in EBITDA, your $400,000-$500,000 cash flow towing business is not worth 4 to 5x.
No.
It's worth 3x. Basically, it's worth asset value, maybe a little bit for the goodwill in there.
That makes sense.
That's fundamentally a problem with all these things I look at. Like, they all look and feel like that. People, because the owners want, they probably have some debt on the trucks. Like, they want to get paid for the trucks, and then they want some value for the business over the top, and then they also want some more to, you know, put in their pocket or retire off of.
John and I actually talked about this around the Air Pros. So in our industry, we had a giant bankruptcy from
That's when it just unwound, right?
Yeah, $250 million bankruptcy, like huge company, 15 locations in 9 states. And we were talking about like what the impact on the market is. And this exact topic came up. If the biggest companies, because on the other hand, right, Sela, which is another big consolidator, it just sold for 20x to JP Morgan. I think it was JP Morgan, or sold to Morgan Stanley, one of the Morgans. But point being is like, us in the lower markets are looking at the higher market to ensure that they're trading at a higher rate, which keeps our rate up. But if we have too many bankruptcies, what ends up happening is, hey, bankruptcy, multiples come down to account for that. So interesting. So like you said, if the top tier guys are trading at 4x, 5x, then you're not as a $300,000 SDE or EBITDA going to trade for the same.
As an industry, right, that's the indicator. We have not hit a point of multiple expansion because fundamentally we have no institutional buyer group. So there's a couple, but you know, again, when the biggest in the industry is only doing 200 million in revenue, right? That's indicative that there's just like, there's another roll up I know of that just started. Like I know the owners of the business that recapped, and they're doing 40 million in revenue, somewhere in that universe. So early days for that yet, but to the point, everyone wants too much for their businesses. I have this discussion with brokers in my market on a monthly basis.
Yeah, right. The fragmentation of the market, though, is super interesting because it really leads to kind of a prime example for a time where it can roll up, even though assets are a little bit higher. It's a very interesting market. I've always loved the towing market, so I think it has big things ahead of it. And so, obviously, not buying that business, that's a no-go. Where do you think that one should actually come in at? I mean, obviously, right, we're looking at a shell of a CIM here.
I mean, yeah, the problem with that is also, like, realistically, call it 3x, right? Call it $1.5 million, something like that. And the problem you have to get over there is convincing an owner that the business is worth less than that owner feels the assets are worth. Now, I'd also bet the assets are not worth 1.8 million. And
I was going to ask you about that because
it's hard
that
to say
comes
without
out
knowing what those trucks are, right? Like saying 24 trucks, if you have 24 beat down autoloaders, you've got, I don't know, $500,000 of equipment. If you've got 24 heavy tow trucks, even if they are 15 or 20 years old and then on their last limbs, they're still worth $100,000 each on the open market.
Yeah.
Right. So like there's just such a range in fair market value. You need the asset list to really make sense of it.
The other part that gets to me that I don't like about that business is, right, it's only doing 2.8 only. It's only doing 2.8 million across 24 trucks, but technically it's in 3 markets, right? It's in Nashville, it's in Chattanooga, and it's down in Atlanta. That feels, I don't know the towing industry as well as you do, but that feels like a very large stretch.
Yeah.
It's like 4 hours of driving, 5 hours of driving.
I bet that is a bit of hand waving to really say, like, I can credibly say we do business throughout the southeastern United States. On any given day, I have trucks in Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, but I'm still based in Raleigh and my location is in Raleigh. So, I might read into that they're not really in those markets. Rather, they do business into those markets because...
Yeah. Which would make sense. Like if I'm in Chattanooga and the business shop is in Chattanooga, like I would imagine that there's a high number of tows, consensual tows from Chat up to Nashville, 2 hours and down 2 hours into Atlanta. That would make sense.
And what you end up with heavy towing is a lot of swap outs, right? So it's I have a fleet that is based out of Raleigh and one of my trucks is in Charleston and broke down. So me as the towing company in Raleigh, I'm going to go to the yard, pick up a working truck, tow it down to Charleston, give it to the driver, take the broken truck from Charleston back up to Raleigh and drop it off at the customer's yard.
Completely makes sense.
So that's a fairly common occurrence with both owned assets as well as leased or rented assets, right? If you lease your trucks through Penske or Ryder or whatnot, if it's a full wet lease, then like they're covering all that stuff for you, right? They're covering getting you a working truck when the one you have breaks down.
Very cool. So no go on that one. Keep an eye on it, wait for it to drop to lower than its assets. Because like I did the math, it's like $75K a truck at 1.8.
And see, like, maybe the answer is there's actually a lot there that is not coming out in that teaser.
Of course.
Or the answer is they're out to lunch. And the only way you really figure that out is you go and have that first discussion.
Exactly. And a broker on Biz Buy Sell being out to lunch, that doesn't happen very often. I appreciate it, Matt. So Matt, if people want to learn more about towing industry or you in general, where is the best place to just get in contact with you or follow you?
Yeah, like you can track me down on Twitter. Folks can also email me. It's first initial last name at eastcoasttowing.com. Always happy to hop on the phone and talk to folks about the industry. I don't even know how many deals I've reviewed with folks over the past year and a half. Like always happy to do so. I've done some consulting work with some groups that have looked at buying towing businesses. So like always happy to look at deals, always happy to engage deeper. And, I learned something selfishly out of all those as well, because it gets me a view of stuff well outside of my market. Yeah. Like I'm not going to go buy a towing business in Missouri, but I've looked at a couple out there and it's all super helpful.
Too cool. And for everyone listening, Saskin's Twitter page, like very fun, lots of pictures, very fun for me as a nerd for this kind of stuff is, tow trucks pulling giant semis off the side of the road.
Yeah.
Just quote unquote, like the one that last I saw was like just backed up over the curb and like half of the fucking thing is hanging out over the curb, or like around a corner on a bend and it's down in the ditch and you guys are like craning it up. It's really cool stuff. Go ahead and jump on over to Twitter, follow him. Awesome. Thank you today. We learned a lot about the towing industry and we learned a lot about the acquisitions in the towing industry. Sweet. Thank you for listening. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Head on over to ownedandoperated.com for all of our owned and operated goodies. And thank you all for listening. See you next time.